What would you do if you walked into a quiet diner and saw three men whose mere presence froze the entire room in fear, except for one woman in a wheelchair? They were loud, laughing obnoxiously, behaving as if the whole place belonged to them. Eyes looked away. The waitress trembled behind the counter. No one dared breathe too loudly. But in the quietest corner of the room, she sat, still, calm, unaffected, as if the chaos around her had nothing to do with her world. No one could have guessed that she, Isabel, was once a Master Chief in the most elite unit of the United States Navy. And that small emblem on the side of her wheelchair? That wasn't decoration. It was a trident, the sacred insignia of a Navy SEAL, and a silent witness to everything she had sacrificed, both her legs and part of her life. While the rest of the diner suffocated under the weight of intimidation. Her calm wasn't apathy. It was the quiet steel of someone who had stared death in the face, and won. And just minutes later, the entire room would witness a stunning reversal, when truth walked in. Cloaked not in noise but in unshakable strength and the kind of respect that makes even the proudest men lower their heads. Isabel Grant wasn't the kind of woman you could easily overlook in a crowded room, not because she was loud or flashy, but because of the quiet strength that radiated from her presence. At 37, her sun-kissed skin still bore the marks of years spent training under the brutal desert sun. Her dark blonde hair was neatly tied back, revealing pale blue eyes, an unblinking gaze that made anyone in front of her feel as though every lie had just been stripped away. Isabel had once been a Master Chief with SEAL Team 9, a living symbol of discipline and courage. She never sought attention, and she certainly never asked for pity. On the steel frame of her wheelchair was a small insignia, an anchor flanked by wings, the legendary Trident badge. Worn only by the most elite warriors in the United States Navy. But behind that emblem lay a story most people wouldn't have the strength to hear in full. 5 years ago, during a hostage rescue mission on the outskirts of Fallujah, her team was ambushed inside a cramped building. A grenade was hurled into the center of the room. There was no time to react. No space to escape. Without hesitation, Isabel shouted, "Get back," and threw herself onto the device, using her body as a shield. The blast tore through the room, but her team survived. Unharmed. Isabel did not. She lost both her legs. But what she kept was her honor. The lives of the men and women she called her family. And a will forged in fire that not even time could break. That woman didn't need to stand to earn respect. She sat, steady as a mountain, and in her silence, she told an entire life story with eyes that had never learned to flinch. A shrill laugh cut through the stillness of the diner like a blade. Tyler, a large man with tattooed arms and eyes full of arrogance, slammed a chair down next to Isabel's table. His legs spread wide like he was claiming territory. His two buddies, Brian and Kyle, weren't any better. They whistled and snickered as they eyed her wheelchair. "Hey, princess," Brian sneered, pointing to the meticulously polished wheel. "How many miles per hour does that thing go?" Isabel looked up, her pale blue eyes expressionless. But it was that silence, the steady, unblinking quiet, that unsettled them far more than any sharp reply. "Oh look," Tyler growled, "not only is she pretty, but she's got herself some military bling too. This badge right here." He jabbed a thick finger at the Trident insignia on the frame of her chair. "That real? Or did it come from a cereal box?" Isabel answered softly, her voice cold and firm like forged steel. "I earned it, with blood, and my team." Tyler laughed reflexively. "No kidding? Are they letting wheelchair warriors into the SEALs now? Must be getting desperate." Kyle chuckled, nodding. "Well, at least she looks better than those crusty vets we ran into at the bar last night." Then, without warning, Tyler shoved the wheelchair's handle hard, sending the chair jolting forward into the table. A cup of steaming coffee tipped over, spilling onto Isabel's black jeans. Silence fell over the room. No one moved. The diner owner crouched behind the register. Other diners stared down into their cold plates, pretending not to see. But Isabel simply looked down at the spreading coffee stain, then raised her head. Her eyes held no rage, no fear, only a calm, razor-sharp resolve. She didn't need to yell. It was her unshaken composure that slapped the wind out of those men, bullies who thought they were powerful, but had never known the weight of real honor. Sitting in a shadowed corner of the diner, near the large window where the midday sun spilled in, Private Ryan Moore, a young U.S. Army soldier, watched everything in silence. He wore a simple t-shirt, jeans, and carried a faded backpack worn from countless deployments. He didn't speak. He didn't touch the sandwich in front of him. But his eyes, sharp as a blade, were locked on the trident badge proudly affixed to the side of the woman's wheelchair. The one everyone in the diner was trying so hard to ignore. Ryan knew exactly what that was. He'd seen the trident etched into headstones, grave markers of heroes. He'd shaken hands with a few who wore it on their uniforms, and every time, his heart sank with reverence. But this time, the trident wasn't on a dress blues jacket. It was on the wheelchair of a woman being mocked by 3 ignorant men. And the silence of the room made his blood boil. He clenched his fist, knuckles turning white, but instead of acting on impulse, he chose discipline, the one thing the army had drilled into him over the years. Without a word, Ryan stood up and walked out the door. Outside, the sun burned bright against the Flagstaff sidewalk. But inside him, only a cold clarity remained. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a number he was told to call only when necessary. "Master Chief, this is Private Ryan Moore," he said firmly. "I'm at the diner on 7th Avenue. A female veteran is being disrespected." He paused. His voice dropped. "She's one of yours. There's a real trident on her chair." There was a beat of silence. The Master Chief on the other end didn't ask another question. "Yes, sir, right away." Ryan ended the call, slipped the phone into his pocket, and quietly returned to his seat. He sat down, his eyes never leaving the table where Isabel faced her bullies. He knew he couldn't take on 3 grown men by himself. But he didn't need to, because her family was already on their way. The room fell into a heavy silence, not the peaceful kind, but the suffocating stillness that settles before a storm. The clink of a knife against a plate was jarring. The ticking wall clock sounded ominous. The diner, once a warm place for lunch and laughter, now felt like a closed theater, where everyone had been forced to watch a cruel play, and no one dared interrupt. Isabel still sat there, motionless, like a statue carved from steel and grit. Her jeans were soaked in hot coffee, the bitter scent rising from the fabric, but she showed no pain. Her gaze held steady, unflinching. Her hands rested on the arms of her wheelchair, fingers long and straight, not trembling. Tyler and his crew still hovered, smug in their false sense of control. Tyler dragged another chair over and slumped down beside her like he was conducting an interrogation. "Gone quiet, huh?" he hissed, mocking. "I thought SEALs weren't supposed to be scared." Brian chuckled, grabbed a packet of sugar from the table, and tossed it at her shoulder. "Oops," he grinned. The packet hit and fell to the floor, small, but deliberate, meant to humiliate. Still, she didn't flinch. That calm, that terrifying, unbreakable calm, slowly began to chip away at their confidence. Tyler's smugness started to fade, confusion creasing his brow. Why hadn't she broken? Everyone in the diner could sense it now. Something was off. Like a great wave rolling silently just offshore. Unseen but inevitable. And only one man in that room knew exactly what was coming. The wave was on its way, and this time, it carried righteous fury. The first sound to shatter the thick tension in the diner wasn't a voice, it was the low, steady growl of engines, the kind of sound built for men who never fail. Through the fogged-up window, 2 black Chevrolet Suburbans glided to the curb like silent predators, parking with surgical precision. The doors opened in one synchronized motion. And then they stepped out, 8 men. No uniforms, no shiny badges, no visible weapons, just black t-shirts, jeans, and tactical boots. But the way they moved, the way they stood tall, the way their eyes swept the room like scanners, you didn't need a military ID to know who they were. Navy SEALs, men who had walked through hell and come back. And today, they weren't here for polite conversation. Inside, Tyler froze. The smirk that had curled his lips all afternoon vanished. His eyes flicked with panic. The men who had just entered didn't need to say a word. Didn't need to threaten anyone. Their presence was the warning. One of them, the leader, had cold gray eyes like a winter ocean. He scanned the scene. The spilled coffee. The frozen customers. Isabel's unshaken stare. And he understood everything without a single question. Without a sound, the SEALs moved into formation. Instinctive. Tight, precise, Each step thudded against the tile floor like a funeral drum, signaling the end for the bullies. They formed a silent circle around Isabel's table. 8 men, 8 mountains of silent muscle. Eyes like scalpels, cutting straight through the souls of the men who had mocked her. In that moment, power shifted, not through violence, not through words, but through presence. And for the first time, Tyler understood, he hadn't just mocked a woman. He had disrespected a symbol. A family that never leaves one behind. The diner felt frozen in time as the Master Chief, the man leading the SEALs, stepped forward. He stood before Tyler, the same man who had sneered, shoved her chair, and treated her like old furniture. His voice rang low, not loud, but sharp as a knife. "I'll ask once, what exactly were you doing to her?" Tyler gulped, his face pale as paper. "It was just a misunderstanding," he stammered. "We didn't know." The Master Chief cut him off with a look. Then he bent slightly and pointed to the trident emblem mounted on Isabel's prosthetic leg. "Do you know what this is? This is not a souvenir. It's not a sticker from a cereal box." He turned toward Isabel, and his gaze softened. She still sat upright, unshaken, regal, unmovable. "This is Master Chief Isabel Grant," he said, his voice echoing across the room. "And she is a legend." No one dared speak. 5 years ago, during an operation in Fallujah, our team was ambushed, he continued. A grenade dropped into the room. No time, no escape. She didn't flinch. She shouted, "Get back," and threw herself on it. She shielded all of us with her body. Another SEAL stepped forward, a long scar running down his cheek. His eyes were red. "I was in that room," he said quietly. "We all were, and we're alive, because of her." His voice cracked. "She lost her legs. We got to go home, to our wives. Our kids." Isabel didn't cry. She looked at them, her brothers in arms, and gave a slow, firm nod. "I have no regrets," she said quietly, but with unshakable strength. "I'd do it again, if I had to." It wasn't just bravery. It was a choice, a conscious sacrifice for others. And that kind of selflessness, was something no bully could understand. No loudmouth. No coward hiding behind laughter. And no one who'd never tasted the weight of real honor. Tyler stood there, head bowed, his broad shoulders now trembling like a child caught in a lie. The arrogance he once wore like armor had vanished completely, leaving behind a confused, diminished man, shrinking beneath the cold stares of 8 warriors and the unwavering presence of the woman he once mocked. The Master Chief didn't have to raise his voice. His tone was low, steady, and enough to silence the entire room. "You're going to stand," he said. "You're going to look Master Chief Grant in the eye. And you're going to apologize for the disrespect you showed her. Then you and your buddies will walk out of here. For good." Tyler looked up, hesitant, but the moment his eyes met Isabel's, those calm, ocean blue eyes, something inside him cracked. I'm sorry, ma'am, I mean, Master Chief," he stammered, barely able to speak. We didn't know. We were idiots." Isabel didn't respond right away. She looked at all 3 of them, now hunched, heads lowered, no longer laughing. Then, after a quiet beat, she gave a small nod. "Apology accepted," she said, her voice calm but firm. She leaned down and gently placed a hand on her prosthetic leg, where the trident was engraved, a mark of a life of service. "You looked at this wheelchair, these prosthetics, and saw weakness," she said. "But they're not signs of loss. They're proof that my team came home alive. And that's a price I'd pay again, if I had to." She raised her head and scanned the room, now silent. "Emotional respect," she said clearly, "doesn't come from fear. It comes from understanding. Understanding who's willing to sacrifice for you, even when you don't deserve it." Her words weren't loud, but they hit deep, like a quiet reckoning. A life lesson etched into the soul. And that day, no one left the diner unchanged. As the 3 bullies murmured their final apologies and shuffled out in silence, it was as if the very air had exhaled. The tension broke. Peace returned. The diner owner, eyes glassy with emotion, approached Isabel and said hoarsely, "You'll never pay for a meal in here again, Master Chief." Then, one by one, the patrons, who had once been paralyzed by fear, stood and began to clap. Not for revenge, but because they had just witnessed something sacred, honor restored. The young soldier, Private Ryan, stepped forward. standing tall like he was on a parade field. He raised his hand in a sharp salute. Isabel nodded in return, her lips curling into the faintest smile, her first one all day. The 8 seals pulled chairs around her, forming a protective circle, a family reunited. They didn't say much, just a few nods, a hand on the shoulder. An inside joke only warriors understand. Isabel had come to the diner in search of peace. But instead, she found something even more precious, a reminder that she was never alone. In life, some carry invisible scars, others bear wounds the whole world can see, but refuse to let them define them. Isabel Grant is proof that sacrifice never loses its meaning, and that respect must be built on understanding, not fear. If this story moved you, if you believe every soldier deserves protection, gratitude, and dignity, comment below. I respect our soldiers. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so we can keep bringing you more real, powerful stories just like this.